Has the market changed its mind about what the Fed may do next?
We have got to get inflation behind us. I wish there were a painless way to do that. There isn't.
Think of that number, and maybe more importantly, what do you think the Fed's going to do, and therefore what your equity is going to do?
I've been saying over and over again to my colleagues here that he wants your portfolio down so that you won't be able to spend as much.
Okay. Good morning, and I'm Christopher Crystal with Financial Stockholm. Today is November 1st, the 2022, and so I hope everybody's Halloween was good, and if you're celebrating the day off, as we do here in Sweden, please enjoy it, and hopefully the market will make you happy and what you're looking for. But in our viewpoint, or my viewpoint from what we see out of the Swedish press, today we still have very little focus on the economics. We have increasing focus on what's going on for our not so much the economy, but our defense. We have this application with NATO. Turkey has made demands for both Finland and Sweden to expatriate or deliver several individuals, about 73, back to Turkey. And so although our Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has said that it's all but done, it looks like there's a few little things to wrangle out. So on top of this, we have our somebody from our Defense Department, Mikael Biden, coming out and saying how the situation in Sweden is dramatic, and we're at a crisis nearly. He's given a press conference this morning to discuss the need to increase our spending to 2%. And so this will be interesting development. Of course, it means that Sweden, which has already sent some missile systems and armored troop transport vehicles, that we will have an increased role, or what our role will be within NATO. So despite all of this, there's still no formalized discussion or kind of conclusion, or other than sabotage for Nord Stream 1 and 2. Nor is there any discussion about who cut the fiber cables into Marseille. And so we do have a changing scenario, changing situation here for Sweden, but some of the key issues we're not discussing. And within our own local politics, you're starting to see in the press discussion about who's gaining power, who's losing power, who's gaining confidence, because we go to no confidence votes when we decide a government is not stable enough. And so we don't see any real development there. Sverigedemokraterna, they had their own little scandal last week when it was revealed this Norrköping woman had her post, which were fairly racist and praising of individuals in history that are just absolutely heinous individuals. And she was a school teacher. So it will be interesting to see how that develops, but she'll still be receiving her pension. She still gets her package from the government. Her family is also entitled to that. Those were included in yesterday's notes. And then also we don't see any discussion of that. We do see a discussion from the unions talking about a loan hike or salary hike, and they're talking about 4%. We don't see any real discussion there other than from the politicians, other than the Moderaterna party member who voted to increase his pay raise from 87,000 Swedish crowns to, I think it was 104,000 Swedish crowns. So he wanted a nice hefty increase right as he started, and we'll see what happens on the salary increases. Rather, he did back away from that because he got cornered. But anyway, so we don't see that, but I think what you're seeing here is a building of a coming no confidence vote. And you've had some recent podcasts discussing the ability or the inability to work with Swedish Democrats and how this will go forward. On the business side, the banks are getting criticism for increasing small rates. So the ability to hold your account will cost you more. And there's a pretty good breakdown about also the mortgage rates and how those have benefited significantly companies like SEB and Swedbank. These are the two companies that are increasing their account rates for the small savers. And so that's a developing issue. Remember, with the banks, one of the keys to them is that the dividend, which goes or it's held by a lot of the foundations here in Sweden, because you get the dividend payout. So it makes it a very interesting discussion going forward. We also see, as a result of this look or scrutinization in Stockholm of the online doctors and the fees that they were receiving from the healthcare system, if it'll be questioned if it's legal or if they have to give back money. You already see some of these net doctors announcing layoffs on the back of this news yesterday. So that's an area that had been growing strongly and will likely be pulled in to some degree. We see that NCC, the construction company, came out with better than expected profits. So we do have some positive news in the real estate sector, although we do see that the credit rating companies here in Sweden, the localized credit rating companies or who do the credit background checks, are seeing increases in bankruptcies. And that's a little disturbing, of course. We don't want to see what's happening in, say, places like Germany, where you're seeing insolvencies on the rise. And but a positive that the Swedish press is now focusing on. Of course, the news has been on in the U.S. business. Everybody's talking about Twitter, and that's a great story if you're a fan of free speech. But we do have limited speech here in Europe, and there are, immediately after Elon tweeted out that the bird is free, we had our European member saying how it will have to play by the European rules. So not so clear what that will mean for Europe, but there is focus on it. There's also focus on what's coming out of the US Senate on cannabis companies and what the decisions will be going forward there in the United States. In Sweden, we have issues with legalization of drugs as well, but nothing really moving forward, and nothing really moving forward on the medicine value of it and legalization in that sense. We do see articles in the Swedish press from discussing China, and China warning Sweden about its positions. So in particular, Taiwan. And there was a letter sent by the UN from 50 different countries addressing China and how they're treating the Uyghurs. Now, Sweden in 2018 did have a proposal to have Uyghurs come here to Sweden as refugees, and we'll see how this develops and if this is part of the Chinese message. And then what we see is, of course, a lot of focus on the U.S. politics, although this doesn't really affect Sweden and doesn't really have any impact for us in any real way. If you take what happened under Obama and you take what happened under President Trump and now under President Biden, the trade ratios haven't really been impacted, and we haven't seen that much. And although in the latest US GDP, you saw a good portion of that growth coming from defense technologies, it's not clear that the Swedish companies would significantly benefit from NATO involvement. But this is a focus in the Swedish press discussing the US politics. And while in Sweden, there's many people who adamantly dislike Donald Trump and would never want to see him as president again, there is a continued discussion, because if you have the House and the Senate going Republican, which the Vegas odds makers are betting on, you would see naturally an impeachment. Now, what would the impeachment mean? If you go back to the very first impeachment, when President Lincoln was assassinated, and then his vice president, who was a Democrat, was up for impeachment, the Senate did not go through and impeach him. And then the next time we had an impeachment, it was, of course, under when Nixon was in office, and they were going to impeach him, so he resigned. And then after that, you had the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and the Senate did not convict him. And then, of course, the same things happened twice with Donald Trump, where he was impeached twice, but he was not convicted by the Senate. In this scenario, you would likely see that Biden would be up for impeachment, and as everybody's going scorched earth, they would likely impeach Kamala Harris as well. And that would mean that the Speaker of the House would take the role. So who the Speaker of the House is, that would probably be McCarthy, and he's out of California. And unless they would replace him with a different Speaker of House. Now, everybody can play around with their own imagination for that. But if McCarthy works as president, and then you see, and that would be what is a really unprecedented move, where the Speaker of the House fulfills the role of the president. Then, if you look at the future election, who would be running? Would it be Donald Trump for the Republican Party? Would it be Joe Biden for the Democrat Party? If he's convicted on impeachment, he could not run again. If Kamala Harris was convicted on impeachment, she could not run again. So they would have to bring in some new candidates. And candidates in that scenario would likely be, in my mind, you would see a more likely something like a DeSantis, Tulsi Gabbard candidate party for the Republicans. And then for the Democrat side, you may see something like Michelle Obama with Gavin Newsom, and Michelle running for president. There's already a lot of strong support for her in the Democrat Party, and she would be a kind of last-ditch hope for the Democrat Party to reestablish themselves in that role. So the next 4 years will be very interesting, or next 2 years certainly. But next week is the U.S. elections. That'll be on November 8th. You have a number of Senate houses up for grab, or Senate and the House positions up for grab, which would decide the outcome. And then, of course, you would move towards an impeachment role. And all you need is the House to go for impeachment, because the House just has to approve it. And then the Senate would have to also vote on it. And then the Senate, if they did not vote to convict, it would go nowhere. So it's very critical on the Senate, as they would be the part for the conviction. And then it would also be very important to see who would be installed as Speaker of the House, and then who would then become the president if they convict both people in the current seats. This is all speculation, but that would be something that nobody's really discussing, and could be worthwhile if you want to read. And I can give more on that later. But other than that, today's markets are moving around, and we do get the Fed coming out with the rates. Larry Summers, who's a pretty good economist and currently teaching at Harvard and has been involved in several different administrations, he is saying that the Fed needs to continue hiking. And but then you have people like Dr. Doom, Rubini, out there saying that the Fed cannot hike too fast because it's going to kill the economy. And the problem is that inflation doesn't go away unless you deflate the money pool. So it's caught in a rock and a hard place. And for that, you would have to go all the way back to Paul Volcker and what he did under Nixon. And this is where Larry Summers is aligning himself in saying that you need to increase the rates, you need to take the pain now in order to get through this. And so we'll continue to watch. But I think really it's unfortunate that the Swedish press is not focusing more on what's going on here in Sweden with its own political base, and looking at, for instance, the Sverigedemokraterna party is proposing a moms increase for shoemakers and cycle repair shops, which would effectively put a lot of these players out of business and turn it over to the larger held stores. So with that, I'll wish you a good day and happy hunting in the market. Okay, thank you. Bye.